Welcome back to Stormi Talks True Crime on my Girls Rock Productions channel. This week's video was inspired by one of the stories on Stormi Tells Ghost Stories, Haunted Paris. I'll be talking about the man who became known as the Bluebird of Gambay and France's Lonely Heart Killer, Henri Desiré Landru. Now, for the courtroom evidence and my personal take on the story, check out the extended version on my Patreon under the Stormi Talks True Crime, The Aftermath, linked in the description box below. Many of what is in these videos wouldn't be allowed here on YouTube, so if you would like to help promote this channel and have access to this extended content, join my Patreon today. Now, back to the story. Henri Desiré Landru was born April 12, 1869 in Paris, France to Julien Landru and Flore Henriquel, making him an Aries. His family was a modest but respectable working-class family. His father was a furnace stoker and later on a factory manager, and his mother was worked for a seamstress. They were devout Catholics, and Landru would receive his education at Catholic school on the Ile Saint-Louis. He was described as a serious student, and he would serve diligently as an altar boy and later on sous deacon. After graduating, he would work briefly at an architect's office. Now, at the age of 20, he would start a relationship with Marie-Catherine Remy while he was still serving in the military. After getting her pregnant, he would marry Marie-Catherine in Paris on October 7, 1893, to legitimize their first child, Marie, born a couple years earlier. Landru began his mandatory 4-year military service in 1889, and he would eventually rise to quartermaster. After completing his service, he would return to Paris in 1894. The couple would go on to have 3 more children together: Maurice, born 1894, Suzanne, born 1896, and Charles, born 1900. Marie-Catherine would work as a laundress during the 1890s, but Henri would struggle to keep down a job. He would be a furniture salesman, an accountant, a map maker, and an assistant toy maker. Marie-Catherine would describe him as a model husband in the earlier years, despite always having a wandering eye. Some people believe that it was around this time that his criminal career would begin, after an employer at an architectural firm where Landru and several colleagues had hoarded savings, allegedly embezzled the funds and fled to America. Landru would turn to fraud to recover his lost funds. This theory is refuted by biographer Dennis Gardens, who argues that Landru had very little savings and may have really just defaulted on a loan from the employer instead. Descent into more serious crime for Landru would go alongside his want to become an inventor. He would have several unsuccessful ventures, which would bring about his first conviction for fraud on July 21, 1904. This would get him 2 years in Fresnay prison. Between 1902 and 1914, Landru would be in and out of prison for various minor frauds. One of his biggest cases would come in 1909 when he attempted to swindle a wealthy widow in Lille, posing as a single businessman. He convinced this woman to hand over her life's savings, said to be around 20,000 francs. But he was caught when he tried to cash her investment certificates and sentenced to 3 years in Lille prison. This experience is what led to him realizing that eliminating one's victims would prevent prosecution. Or in other words, no body, no crime. Landru would conduct his most successful pre-war fraud in the winter of 1913 to 1914. He would collect 36,000 francs from investors for a fake automobile factory. He fled with the money and much of his inheritance just before the police would arrive to arrest him in April of 1914. He would be convicted in absentia. This would be his 6th conviction, so he would be sentenced to 4 years hard labor, followed by a lifelong deportation to New Caledonia. He would use various names while constantly moving to avoid capture up to the beginning of World War I. The outbreak of World War I in August of 1814 would create a grim opportunity for Landru. With hundreds of thousands of Frenchmen being mobilized or killed, newspapers would fill up with Lonely Hearts ads from wartime widows looking for a man for companionship and security. Being exempt due to age and dependence, and also the fact that he was a fugitive, Henri realized that he could take advantage of this, being a seemingly stable man. He began placing his own ad in Le Journal, presenting himself as a respectable widower with 2 children, aged 43, comfortable income, affectionate, serious, and moving in good society, desires to meet a widow with a view to matrimony. Or, serious gentleman seeks widow aged 35 to 45, or woman unlucky in love. As he suspected, he would receive a flood of replies, often expressing hardship and loneliness. Landru would meticulously catalog these letters in notebooks. He would prioritize correspondence based on perceived wealth. He used categories such as returns reply poste restante, no money, no reply, returns reply poste restante with initials, probably has assets, reserve further investigation required. Discarding those deemed propertyless, he would also focus on seemingly naive with assets. In December of 1914, Landru would rent out Villa Hermitage in Brunoy, about 21 miles northwest of Paris. This would become the site of his first confirmed murders. In late January or early February of 1915, he would kill Jean-Marie Couchet and her teenage son, André. On June 26, 1915, he would kill Therese Laborde-Line, and around August 3, 1915, he would kill his final victim in Verneuil, Marie-Angélique Julien. For more about these victims, check out my extended content on my Patreon. Now, by late 1915, the neighbors were starting to become suspicious of Henri. Feeling exposed and seeking more seclusion, Landru would rent an isolated villa Trick, which was nicknamed the Hermitage, in the village of Gambay, just south of Paris. This was actually the location that I talk about on the Stormi Tells Ghost Stories. It's in week 3 of Haunted Paris if you want to check it out after this video. Upon moving into his new private abode, he would purchase a large kitchen oven and a whole lot of coal. After moving in, he would go back to picking up where he left off from the Lonely Hearts ads. In late December of 1915 or early January 1916, he would take his next victim, Berthe Anna Héon. Then Landru would take a little bit of a cool-off period before killing Anna Kalum on December 27th, 1916. André Babelet would be last seen on April 12th, 1917. Célestine Boisson would last be seen in September of 1917. Louise Josephine Jean would also disappear after moving in with Landru in November of 1917. Divorcee Anne-Marie Pascal would disappear soon after meeting Landru in April of 1918, and there would be another long cool-off period before Henri would kill his final known victim, Marie-Thérèse Marchadier, in January of 1919. Landru's downfall would be brought about due to the persistence of the families of his victims, in particular Marie Lacoste, the sister of Célestine Boisson, and Victoria Palais, the sister of Anna Kalum. After receiving no reply from Célestine to the letters about her blinded son, Lacoste contacted the mayor of Gambay in January of 1919. The mayor wasn't really helpful at first, but he would put her in touch with Palais, who had similar inquiries about her sister Anna, who had also gone missing in Gambay. The two women would start comparing notes and would finally come to the conclusion that Thommier and Dupont were actually the same person. They would then file missing persons reports on their sisters with the prosecutor for Seine-et-Oise. Their complaints would eventually make it to the inspector Jules Bellin of the Paris Brigade Mobile. The crucial break would come in on April 11, 1919. A friend of Lacoste, Louis Bonnoir, having issues with the French, who had previously seen Landru, recognized him shopping on the Rue des Renois with a young woman who would later be revealed as Fernande Segre. Bonnoir, I'm sorry, still having issues, would alert Lacoste, who would then phone Bellin. The inspector would then get a business card that Landru, who was going by the name of Lucien Joulet, had left at the shop, revealing his current address near Gare du Nord. The inspector would obtain the correct warrants, and two officers would arrest him the next day on his birthday, April 12, 1919. The story goes that he would sing an aria from Massen's opera Manon to Fernand Segre as he was being led away. Landru would remain defiant throughout the interrogations, refusing to confirm his identity initially and repeatedly protesting his innocence. He would finally admit to being Henri Landru and that he was using aliases because he was a wanted fugitive, but he would insist that this did not make him a murderer. When he was questioned about the woman's whereabouts, he famously responded, "That's my affair. You do your job, I'll do mine," and then invoked his right to silence by saying, "That is my secret. French law recognizes my right to remain silent." Now, he could stay silent all he wanted, but investigators were actually uncovering an overwhelming amount of evidence for fraud in the least. Victims' clothing, furniture stored in garages, and crucial documents and bank details for Colombe and Boisson. Most damning would be his black notebook containing detailed financial accounts, records of meetings with 283 women contacted through ads and agencies, and the list of the 11 presumed victims. This notebook would become the primary evidence used against him in court. Many of these women were located alive, confirming Landru's pattern of seduction and fraud. The fact that 283 women listed became something of a running gag in France. The search at his Gambé villa on April 29, 1919 yielded the only actual physical evidence of murder. 4.176 kilograms of calcified bone debris, including 295 human bone fragments, plus scraps of cloth and buttons, were found in the ashes under the shed and inside the kitchen oven. Forensic analysis by Dr. Charles Paul determined the fragments came from at least 3 skeletons, but could not confirm their sex or link them definitively to known missing women. The lack of bodies remained a major hurdle for the prosecution. Landru openly mocked the police during the searches, turning up frequently and making the process a public spectacle. In fact, excavations of the garden only unearthed the skeletons of 2 dogs, which Landru claimed belonged to Marchadier, and he had killed them and buried them at her request. The investigation would also reveal the complicity of Landru's family. His youngest son, Charles, acted as an apprentice, helping move furniture and admitting to assisting with unspecified gardening work at Vernouillet around the time of the Couchet's disappearance. His eldest son, Maurice, was caught with Jean Couchet's jewelry given by Landru and later helped create a cover story for Anna Colombe's disappearance. Landru's wife, Marie-Catherine, lived under his aliases Framier and admitted forging signatures for Celestine Buisson and Louis Jean to access their bank accounts. but she did deny knowing why. Maurice and Marie Catherine were actually arrested in December of 1919, but they were released in July of 1920 without charge, likely because proving their knowledge of the murders beyond all reasonable doubt would be difficult for a jury. Charles was never arrested. The trial would begin on November 7, 1921, and it was pretty much a circus. Landru had become a celebrity with his witty retorts and calm expression. He was even receiving fan mail and marriage proposals. His lawyer was renowned Vincent de Moro Giaffari, and he would try to pick apart the prosecution's case by questioning the forensic evidence, stating that it could have been planted. In the end, the jury didn't buy it, and they did convict him on all 11 murder charges 9-3, and all theft charges unanimously. On November 30th, 1921, Moro would persuade the jury to sign a petition for clemency, and Landru would turn it down at first, still trying to maintain his innocence. Now, Landru would eventually sign the clemency petition, but it was rejected by President Alexandre Mitterrand. On February 25th, 1922, Henri Landru was executed just before dawn. He was executed by guillotine outside the gates of prison Saint-Pierre in Versailles. On the night before his execution, a large crowd would gather to witness the event, but only officials and journalists were allowed access. The execution was reported to only last about 26 seconds. This would include Landru walking up to the guillotine, the blade coming down, his head falling into the basket, his torso being rolled into a wicker basket, and everything being loaded up onto a covered cart. Landru's legacy would go on long after his execution. His possessions were sold off, including the infamous oven. In 1963, a supposed confession letter would surface behind a framed sketch of the oven. This was found by the daughter of one of Landru's lawyers when she removed it from the frame. Well, that concludes this week's episode of Stormi Talks True Crime. Feel free to leave comments on the story below or suggestions of other stories you might like to hear. Don't forget to check out some of my other playlists while you are here on Stormi Teaches Music. I release a cover video on Mondays at 6 p.m. Eastern, and a video of me teaching the song covered on Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. You can catch the live stream of the lesson on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Eastern on my Patreon. On the Stormi Does Art playlist, I have some partial videos of the live streams you can get on my Patreon for the gold tier or higher. These streams are daily at 1 p.m. Eastern, and there is a link to my Patreon in the description box below. Finally, check out Stormi Tells Ghost Stories, where I talk about haunted cities all around the world. These videos are posted Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern. For anyone who wants to make a one-time donation to the channel to help keep it running while I'm building my audience, there is the QR code to my Venmo and CashApp on the screen, and there is also a link to both in the description box below. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons on your way out, and I will see you next Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Till then, stay safe and have a great week.